Building organisations designed to help employees to flourish and thrive. That's what we just heard there. And that's actually fits in very well with what I'm going to talk to you about today, which is about the importance of the wider organisational culture and environment in helping each one of the employees in your organisations to do exactly that. And if they prioritise their own wellness, their own well-being, to have a supportive organisation. And what we're going to do is we're going to go through some of the impacts for it. But first, every good presentation starts with a large number on a page. In fact, I don't want to be at a conference where presentations don't start with large numbers on pages, particularly if they're as colourful as that, and I have my design studio to thank for it. It's even better if they're not random. And this number isn't random either. This number, 34, represents the average stress and strain experienced by employees who have filled in all of our clients' surveys. So when we aggregated all of our data together from all of the clients that we do wellbeing research with, 34% of them said they've been under constant strain in the past 6 months. Now, interestingly, that's actually a little lower than I've seen elsewhere. I've seen figures like the Mental Health UK Foundation saying that 74% of people feel overwhelmed or unable to cope at some point in the last 12 months. Or the Perkbox UK Workplace Stress Survey, which is a difficult thing to say, so I wrote it down, said that 59% of their respondents felt stress. So interesting that ours is a little lower. I wonder whether it's that use of the word constant strain over the past 6 months. Now, strain and stress are slightly different things. And so as we go through this, what we're going to be talking about in some cases is an input. Strain is an input, and stress, the output, the outcome. If you get under considerable strain, under considerable pressure to perform in your work life, in your home life, then you can tip into a stress reaction. Stress is the reaction to that. And what we're going to look at is some of the impacts that that stress reaction can cause, and then some of the things that can be put into the middle of the two to create more room for stress not to happen. And the impact is considerable. So again, when we've looked at research that we've conducted, we've noticed that employees that experience high levels of stress are considerably different in their organisational outcomes, in their engagement, in their HR analytics outcomes than people who don't. They're much less likely to recommend their organisation as a place to work to family or friends. Their pride is lower. They're much less likely to feel the organisation motivates them for whatever purpose. And perhaps most worryingly to HR professionals, as the majority of the people in the room are, they're up to 27% more likely to say they're going to leave the organisation in the next 2 years. And that's a highly predictive question when you look at actual attrition rates. So there's a considerable impact to high levels of stress. Of course, the only way that you can find out the impact is by measuring it, is by doing research. And so what we're going to go through for the rest of my allotted time is some case studies from people that have done that, some research and what it's shown. But the impact is so considerable that there's a considerable amount of money that's spent trying to counter it. One market report that I read in my preparation for today said that the global wellness market is currently £3 trillion worth of value. It's an awful lot of well-being apps, steps being counted, people being quantified. And I say meditation, I say steps being counted, people being quantified, because that seems to be so much of the attention and the focus of the well-being industry and the wellness industry. All of those apps, all of those quantification, all of those mind space, head space, meditation, so on and so forth. And that's really, really important. Again, as we heard, people who prioritise their own well-being and their own wellness, it's really, really important. It has a real impact on the levels of stress that they experience. But it's not the only thing. And as HR professionals, we can't just go and say, well, everyone just needs to download Mindspace and that'll fix it. That's not a well-being strategy. That's a transaction. We need to look at some of the wider environmental and cultural things that can impact the way that employees feel and the way that employees experience strain and stress. And thankfully, the research suggests that this is just as, if not more important to employees than the things that they download, than the things that they can do themselves. And I'm going to focus on 3 aspects of the employee experience. I'm going to focus on managerial support, I'm going to focus on meaningful work, and I'm going to focus on team environment. So managerial support. The CIPD's Wellbeing at Work report says that only 1/3 of organisations currently offer training and guidance on wellbeing to line managers. Now that's a big miss, because actually when you look at the data from employee surveys, there is a considerable halo effect for employees whose manager considers their well-being. Not does anything about it, by the way, just considers. That's the word that we've used in our research. Do they consider your well-being. If they do, then you're considerably less likely to report stress in your organization. Now, that's a considerable impact that 2/3 of organizations aren't getting if they're not training, if they're not empowering, if they're not helping line managers through the organization to understand the impact, understand the, excuse me, really am throat very quickly. Understand the importance of looking at mental, physical, and all sorts of well-being. So secondly, meaningful work. And this is quite interesting for us. So we had a large multinational organization that came to us asking to do some specialized research on stress and strain, and particularly on the HR outcomes of that. They were very keen to have a look at how they could mitigate stress because they had a very firm belief that stress led to attrition, that more stressed employees were more likely to leave the organization. And as you saw earlier on the slides, that does seem to hold. So when we started to do the research, absolutely, as we found in the first instance, there was a population who exhibited higher stress than average, and they were also more likely to be wanting to leave the organisation in 2 years than average. So far, so good. But then we looked another level down into the data, and we found something that seems to completely flip that on its head. We had one population who were very highly stressed, but who were much more likely to want to stay in the organisation. We had another population who had extremely low levels of stress, but were actively seeking to leave the organisation at the earliest possible opportunity. So to look into this in more detail, we went another level down into the data, and we discovered an interesting difference between the three populations, the three employee cohorts. It was the presence of accomplishment, and it was the presence of boredom. The population who were reporting high stress, but who didn't want to leave the organisation, also reported having jobs that gave them a sense of accomplishment, jobs that gave them a sense of satisfaction, and also jobs that meant they were rarely bored. The employees who exhibited very low levels of stress, but who were very, very keen to leave the organisation at the earliest opportunity, didn't have the same roles. They had roles that didn't give them much accomplishment or challenge, and as a result, they were often bored. So these two things, this accomplishment and boredom, seems to have some kind of mitigating factor, even in the presence of stress, to the outcomes that everyone assumed were going to be happening. And by the way, we talked about managerial support. That was there too. The high-stress, low-attrition population also reported having managers that were highly supportive of them and considered their well-being, compared to the ones who were not stressed at all, but who were still likely to leave. So there is something there about even when there is stress, even when that strain input has reacted in a stressful way, or the employees reacted in a stressful way, there are things that seem to be able to mitigate anything too critical from an organisational point of view. So the third one, team environment, was particularly important as it relates to resilience. And resilience is the holy grail, I guess, of stress and of mental well-being. It's the thing that everyone wants to have, that idea of no matter what pressure is placed on you, and I'm speaking in the engineering context now, I guess, whatever pressure is placed on you, you can bounce back to your original shape, to your original emotional state, to your original, if we're being horrible and reductive here, your operational effectiveness to the organisation. So resilience is important. And when you look at the data, again, employees who report high resilience are much more likely to say that they can manage that stress effectively. That even when stress comes, they can react well and they can get back to where they were pretty quickly thereafter. But again, it's not just about the individual. We found that it wasn't just about what people were doing to increase their own resilience. And resilience training is now, I mean, I've taken some resilience training myself. It's really effective. It's very, very helpful. But there's more that organizations can do than just rely on employees taking the initiative, taking the prioritization to make themselves more resilient. Because when we looked at the impact of a supportive team environment, we found that it was very, very useful as a precursor to increased resilience and also lower stress. So people that reported high levels of peer support were much more likely to be able to get back to normal quickly after something had gone wrong. That's a really important aspect of resilience, that idea of being able to bounce back quickly, not just bounce back at all, but bounce back quickly. So it was the employees that were reporting a supportive peer and team environment that were doing that. And again, the people that reported high levels of support from their colleagues, from their teams, from their peers, were also much more able to manage the stress that they experienced in their day-to-day roles. Oh, and again, sorry, line manager support, a cumulative impact, the icing on the cake, if you will. It's always there. Now, we conducted a lot of qualitative research off the back of these findings with lots of organisations to try and understand what it is about those three aspects that mean that employees... Is it something that's just a general, oh, okay, it's the people who are more resilient anyway that are answering this way, or is it the other way around? And what we found, and what people tended to tell us time and time again, was a potential reason for the positivity in the results. Employees that have those three things, a supportive manager, meaningful work, and a strong team environment, say that they frame pressure and stress in a different way. They see it as a challenge to them to have a highly pressured role, to have strain, rather than an imposition, something that they can rise to and meet in a positive way, rather than something that's placed crushing them down from on top. The culture around them means that they view the signals that could create a stress response in a different way to if they don't have those three things as well. So again, going back to what we heard at the top in the introduction, all of the apps in the world can help individuals prioritize their own well-being and their own wellness. They can help them quantify themselves. They can help them get fitter by doing more exercise. They can help them calm themselves by doing meditation and mindfulness. But all of the apps in the world aren't going to help if an individual is sitting in an organizational culture or an organizational environment that isn't supportive of that activity. The organization needs to rise to support the people that are prioritizing their wellness for the benefit of all of the people that aren't prioritizing their wellness, because not everyone is doing that. So whilst employees and organizations focus on themselves and focus on whatever it is they want to do to raise them, whether it be yoga, whether it be mindfulness, whether it be meditation, getting them to look up and talk to their peers and talk to their managers is also highly beneficial. And thankfully that fits in perfectly with the ethos of a mature, strategic HR function. Creating supportive line managers, creating meaningful work, building open, honest, psychologically safe team environments are exactly the things that we as HR professionals should be doing every single day. What we need to do, though, to be able to get that is to show the impact of where those things aren't happening. And far too often what we see is well-being theory and well-being strategy done with blinkers on for the benefit of itself. A circular argument in terms of well-being, rather than actually looking at the broadest possible impact of the well-being, but also what HR can do or what the organisation can do just as part of its general practice to be able to positively impact the well-being of its employees. So if anyone here doesn't do that at the moment and wants to understand a bit more about it, then there are some charming people from Karian and Box standing in the lobby, and we're very happy to talk you through this and other research that we've done, because what we've really found is that it has a telling impact on the way that employees can manage the stress and strain they experience and also have much more positive outcomes for the organisation as a whole.